the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see in the world. The world will change with the change in me. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see in the world. The world will change with the change in me. Be the change you want to see in the world. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see in the world. The world will change with the change in me. The world will change with the change in me. There we go. It's a quiet one.
As an affirmation for peace in the Middle East, and in solidarity with our Muslim and Jewish brothers and sisters, all of us people of the book, we greet one another. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Peace be upon you.
And upon you peace.
Shalom.
Alaikum shalom.
So good morning.
Good morning.
As most of you know, I'm Reverend Vicki Elder, and it is my joy and honor to welcome you to Unity of Monterey Bay, a beloved community co-created with love and intention that welcomes all people, all races, nationalities, cultures, and religions, whatever your immigration status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and or abilities. Whether you're here with us in person or joining us virtually, we know that love knows no boundaries. We are one in spirit. As a purpose-driven church, Unity of Monterey Bay is an inclusive spiritual community committed to co-creating an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just, and compassionate human presence on this planet. We celebrate our oneness and honor the God of each of our understanding, affirming the innate good and divine essence within each and every individual. Would you please join me in our statement of faith? There is only one presence and one power in the universe, God the good, expressing as infinite God beyond us, intimate God beside us, inner God being us, divine love in action. And now let's take this affirmation of truth even deeper into our hearts and minds with a reading by Dan Sadlier, posted by St. Albans Episcopal Church. Christianity can be confusing, but the way of Jesus was pretty clear. Move toward the poor, empower the woman, create space at the table, throw parties, widen the family boundaries, poke holes in oppressive systems, don't retaliate with violence, forgive your enemy, don't store up wealth, be present with people, heal, announce, push back darkness. The kingdom of God is near. And now let's affirm together. Thank you, God, for this most amazing day. Miracle follows miracle, and wonders never cease. And in this spirit of miracles and wonders, as we tap into that inner child within each of us, we celebrate our children, those in our spiritual community, in our families, in the larger community, all the children in the world, holding them in our hearts and seeing them protected and resilient, creative and evolving, joyous and loved as we join in our heartfelt blessing. We love you, we bless you, we appreciate you just the way you are.
I'm gonna let it shine.
As we reminded you last week and had in our e-blast, today is Change Sunday. We do it once a quarter, just like we do the building fund once a quarter. And the change jar goes to our Fred Kleppe fund that we created, wow, almost 20-something years ago, that helps us provide assistance to those in need. And so come on up and bring your change as we...
Love is something if you give it away. Give it away. Give it away.
Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. It's just like a magic
penny, holding tight and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, and you have so many. They'll roll along without floor. For love is something if you give it away. Give it away. Give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more. It's just like a magic penny, holding tight and you won't have any. Lend it, spend it, and you have so many. The roll along without floor. Love is something if you give it away. Give it away. Give it away. Love is something if you give it away, you end up having more.
I always forget. I have to wait like 2 seconds for this mic to work. I can't just turn it on and start working. But I want to acknowledge Paulinda because she's the one that brought this idea to us. They used to do it at her school, and so we've been doing it for years and years now. So thank you, Paulinda. All the unique ways. It's a skeleton bank. Right, a skelly bank. Okay, so now taking a deep breath in and letting it out with an audible sigh, we center ourselves to embrace this blissful interconnection with Spirit and invite the chime to call us into the sacred space within. We ring the chime 4 times to call in the 4 directions and remind us of our interconnection with all of creation and with the sacred circle of life. As we feel it resonate through our very beings, we follow its call into this now present moment within. Continuing to focus on our breath, with each inhale, we open our hearts and minds. We envision our breath reaching every cell of our being, and with each exhale, we see all barriers and obstacles dissolving into the divine flow. Again, as we inhale, we expand the spaciousness within us. We move beyond the limitations and boundaries of our bodies. And as we exhale, we ground ourselves deep within Mother Earth and into our oneness with the universe. Finally, we breathe our awareness into the highest expression of love, light, joy, and peace we can imagine. As we experience a transforming wave of gratitude, and with a fullness of heart, we say yes to it all, embracing, claiming, and knowing the divine Christ Spirit expressing in, through, and as us. And with a final exhale, we say thank you, God. Now fully centered and transformed by the power of Spirit, we enter into our lesson and meditation time with today's daily word.
We read from the June 17th Daily Word, shared with permission of Unity, publisher of Daily Word, that can also be found at dailyword.com. and the word is faith. I invite you to allow my words to be your words. The power of my faith leads me to accomplish great things. Before I can accomplish anything, I must first believe it can happen. No matter how ambitious the aspiration or how lofty the goal, I must begin with faith in myself that I have what it takes to achieve it. Not only do I have faith in myself, I also have faith in God. I need never work towards bringing my dreams to life alone. God is with and within me. Grace that smooths my way and the source of my inspiration and spiritual strength. Even when I encounter discouraging or frustrating circumstances, I stand strong in faith. I remember there is no circumstance, no setback greater than God. There is no limit to how far faith can carry me. I dare to dream big and reach far, knowing with God nothing is impossible. And from scriptures, then he touched their eyes and said, according to your faith, let it be done to you. Matthew chapter 9, verse 29.
I am here for the greater good of all, greater good of all, greater good of all. I am here for the greater good of all, greater good of all. You are here for the greater good of all, greater good of all, greater good of all. You are here for the greater good of all, greater good of all. We are here for the greater good of all, greater good of all, greater good of all. We are here for the greater good of all, greater good of all.
This morning we read from the Gospel of Luke on this morning's topic, the parable of the widow and the unjust judge. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, grant me justice against my accusers. For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out, continually coming. And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? From Luke chapter 18, 1 through 8.
Mystery divine, deep within us all, may we know your presence as we gather here today. Mystery divine, open to your call. We will seek your wisdom and your peaceful way. Mystery divine, deep within us all, may we know your presence as we gather here today. Mystery divine, open to your call. We will seek your wisdom and your peaceful way. Mystery divine, deep within us all, may we know your presence as we gather here today. Mystery divine, open to your call. We will seek your wisdom and your peaceful way. Ooh.
Do you all know how lucky I am to get to sing with this woman?
Lucky I am too.
She's amazing. Okay, so Vicki was laughing as we were reading the scripture. It is kind of a weird one, right? I told her it gets weirder, or it gets worse, it gets crazier. This was a weird one, I have to say. So we've been looking at the parables of Jesus and using the book Short Stories by Jesus, written by Amy Jill Levine, who's a renowned Bible scholar, and she's a professor of New Testament and Jewish studies at Vanderbilt Divinity School. So to recap, if you weren't here last week, and just to remind us, Dr. Levine is unique in that she brings this wonderful perspective to the parables of Jesus, at all of her work really, as both a Bible scholar and a Jewish woman, one who knows both the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures inside out. And she certainly has opened my eyes to a lot of things, especially how many of our traditional interpretations of the Bible stories can be problematic in that they perpetuate negative Jewish stereotypes. All too frequently in our interpretation of Scripture, Jews and Jewish culture are cast in a negative light, while Jesus and Christianity are cast in a positive light. And we talked last week about this harmful belief, I gave it a fancy name, supersessionism. It's a harmful belief that Christianity replaced Judaism, that Christianity was a sort of upgrade to Judaism. And it's this idea that the Jews at the time of Jesus had become mired in legalism, and Jesus came to introduce these concepts of love and grace. Now, I've learned that this is both inaccurate and deeply damaging because it devalues Judaism. and it perpetuates negative stereotypes of Jewish culture and religion. Unfortunately, these viewpoints and these ways of seeing things have become so common and so deeply embedded in Christian thought that we often don't even see them. I know I had not seen it. But Dr. Levine, through her work, is training me to see it, and it has absolutely changed the way that I will talk about Jewish culture and the laws of the Torah from the pulpit in the future. So I'm grateful for that. So she brings this wonderfully refreshing perspective to Jesus' teachings. And one of the main points that she makes about the parables of Jesus is that they are meant to be provocative. Okay? They don't lend themselves to an easy, moral, and the moral of the story is, okay, they don't lend themselves to that. Rather, they're meant to make us think, to dismantle our preconceived ways of seeing things so that we can see with new eyes. And this process can help us to have new insights. That's the whole idea, right? As we're going through this process of looking at the parables, the idea is for us to have new insights about ourselves, about other people, about God, and about the world around us. And these insights, ideally, should help us to become better people and to do a better job of loving our neighbor as ourselves. So this week, we're looking at the parable of the widow and the judge, and you've already heard it this morning, but I'm going to go over it again because it's a little weird. And it comes in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18. And it begins where Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. So Jesus tells this story that there was in a certain city a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. Sounds like a real swell guy. In that city, there was a widow who kept coming to the judge and saying, "Give me justice against my accuser." For a while, the judge refused to do what the widow asked. But then later he said to himself, "Even though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, because this widow keeps bothering me, I'm going to grant her justice so that she will stop coming back and pestering me." Okay? And then there's this ending part which says, "And the Lord said, listen to what the unjust judge says. Won't God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in helping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Okay, right? It's a little weird. Especially the part where the judge talks to himself. Let's see, because I'm not a nice guy. Sounds like a cartoon. So the first thing we need to know about this parable is that it has 3 parts. The important part is the core of the parable. That's where the story between the judge and the widow happens. Then there's the beginning part and the end part, which are the frame. And a frame, apparently, in biblical talk, is this extra material that we're not sure how it got there. Either Luke added it on later, or one of the various editors, as it was going through the redaction process, added it on. Okay? So most scholars don't believe that the beginning part and the end part are original to Jesus, that the parable itself is original to Jesus. Okay? So Luke or some editor added these parts to help the reader or the listener understand what the parable means. Now, given that Jesus' parables can be pretty frustrating to make sense of, you could see where we might appreciate getting a sort of heads up as to what this parable is supposed to be about, right? However, Dr. Levine says that these extra editorial frames are often much too simple. She says they domesticate the parable. Remember, parables are meant to be provocative. So they take the provocation out of it, and a lot of times they just frankly don't make sense, or they don't seem to go with the parable itself. That's the case today. So by telling us right away what lesson we're supposed to get from the parable, Luke, or the editor, has basically subverted the provocative nature of the story that Jesus told before we've even heard it. Okay? And telling us what we're meant to think about it, right? But that's not the way these parables were supposed to work. We're supposed to be left pondering, scratching our heads, wondering, trying to figure out what this parable is about. And then deriving our own personal meaning from the parable based on, our own, the way we hear it, the lens through which we hear the parable, which has everything to do with who we are and what our issues are and what our triggers are and all this type of thing. And then that personal meaning is supposed to help us to reflect on our own lives and our own selves. What Luke has done here is essentially stopped the power of the parable before it has even had a chance to start working. I don't know why he did that. Maybe it wasn't Luke. Maybe it was someone after. But anyway, there it is, right? So Luke tells us that this is a parable about the importance of always praying and not losing faith. Dun, dun. It's like, the moral of the story is, okay? And I can almost hear Dr. Levine going, oy vey, right? Because she would say, that's much too simple. Then Jesus would have just said, you should pray and not lose faith. He wouldn't have wasted his time telling this complex parable just to make that point. She says that's much too simple, and that is not what Jesus' first century Jewish audience would have likely heard, which is what we're trying to get at, right? So while the widow in the parable actually demonstrates a fair amount of courage, tenacity, and what we're going to call agency, she's acting on her own behalf, pestering the judge until she gets what she wants. Levine says that with the frame at the beginning saying that it's about praying and not losing heart, he's basically reduced this widow to a weak, dependent old woman. She says Luke has tucked her in with other conventional images of poor, dependent, or powerless widows. Now this is interesting because the Gospel of Luke is often held up as being the most friendly to women, right? Luke mentions more women than the other Gospel writers, and sometimes Luke's women actually get more than just a mention. They actually get to do and say things. But in this case, with this easy moral of the story that Luke has given us, he's just adding another widow to a long list of widows that he mentions in his gospel that don't really have much agency. They merely do things like praying and fasting. Isn't that nice? Praying and fasting. But they don't really do or say much else. Again, Levine says the widow has become conventional and the parable has lost its challenge. Now, she says that if we look a little deeper, we may find that the widow, and we're not going to do that today, but she has wonderfully done it in her book, so we don't have to. She surveys the Bible and tells us all the other places where widows appear and how they act, and she says that sometimes we may find that the widows of the Bible have more going on than we realize at first glance. Women usually do. She says biblical widows are the most unconventional of conventional figures. Expected to be weak, they move mountains. Expected to be poor, they prove savvy managers. Expected to be exploited, they take advantage where they find it. And then she goes on to give examples from the Bible of widows who have demonstrated that kind of thing. She names Tamar, Naomi, Ruth, Orpah, Abigail, Judith, and Zarephath. And she says they all demonstrated some sort of agency and thus defied that convention of the poor and dependent woman. So could that be the same case in our parable today? We're going to find out. She also explains that in Jesus' parables, women frequently do have agency, more so than in other parts of the Bible. In fact, Jesus regularly engages and interacts with women whose agency goes beyond things like praying and fasting. Think of Mary and Martha, the Samaritan woman at the well, and the woman who anoints Jesus' feet with oil. In fact, many scholars say that Jesus' treatment of women as active participants in social and civic life is a bit unusual for the time. So was Jesus a feminist? Maybe not in the way that we understand the word today, but he certainly treated women with respect and possibly even took them as disciples. So might the widow in this particular parable have more going on than we see at first glance? Sometimes the name that we give a parable has a strong influence in how we understand the parable. Okay? In this case, our parable has traditionally been called the importuning widow. Okay, I had to look up the word importuning. Well, apparently, a person who is importuning is someone who persistently harasses someone to do something. Synonyms of importuning include begging, imploring, and beseeching. So when they call this parable the importuning widow, they are already casting the widow in a certain light. She begs and pleads and implores the judge. And this gives her a quality of weakness, right, and powerlessness. Levine says that if we were to call the parable the persistent widow, or the tenacious widow, or even the nagging widow, that would give her somewhat more agency. Okay? So she explains, following Luke's cues and biblical stereotypes, we readers tend to presume the widow's cause is just and that the judge models unrighteousness. And we root for this woman because we're conditioned from certain biblical and cultural stereotypes to see widows as not only helpless and needy, but also exploited and abused, right? Think of the poor little widow, right? Coming up with her coin to place in the coin thing, where you put the coin in the temple. In that thing. Okay, but Levine reminds us, parables are supposed to surprise us, right? And they frequently present us with the opposite of what we expect. So what is unexpected about this particular widow? Well, let's have a look at the Greek word that is used to describe what the widow is asking of the judge. So she comes back to the judge again and again, and many translations use the word justice, that she's seeking justice. But the Greek word, the original, that's used in this passage is actually ektikeo, which actually would be better translated as seeking to be avenged. So she's not just seeking justice, she is seeking vengeance. That begins to change how we see her, right? Now, we don't know what kind of vengeance she's seeking. We don't know if she wants money or property, or if she wants her adversary to be thrown in jail or even executed. We don't know. But if we look at the word ektikeo, how it's used in other places in the Bible, which Levine does, we get the idea from its use that the widow is not just seeking justice, but rather she is seeking to punish her opponent. Okay? And there's another instance in which the Greek translation makes a difference in how we read the parable. When the judge says, I will avenge her so she doesn't keep coming back and wear me out. Okay, wear me out. That's the translation found in the NRSV, which is the New Revised Standard Version. But Levine says that the original Greek term used here is actually a boxing term, which means something more like beat him up or give him a black eye. That kind of changes our impression of this weak, defenseless widow. She's going to pop him one. We also may be getting a better idea of why the judge gives in to her demands. Let's look a little more at the character of the widow. So Dr. Levine reminds us that our preconceived notions about things can color the way we interpret a parable. Now, this goes for everything in the Bible, right? We bring all of our preconceived notions, our associations with certain words, our associations with certain elements, and with certain types of characters, right? And that colors how we interpret it, even before. So we've already made this judgment about the widow, even before she speaks or acts. She says, typically we associate widows with being under God's care. We think of widows as being vulnerable and in need of protection. And she says widows are not typically characters that we want to emulate. Rather, they're characters that we feel like we want to help. We want to help the widow, right? Levine tells us that the Torah is clear about how we are to treat those in society who are vulnerable and in need of protection. The law frequently mentions the widow, the orphan, the oppressed, and the poor. And these are groups that the Torah says should be protected, supported, aided, and granted justice. And so the message about widows is clear. God does not forsake or ignore the widow. But what about this particular widow who's going to bop the judge? We don't know anything about her, right? What about her social status? So it's usually been assumed that the widow was practically destitute, right? That because her husband died and she had no legal rights to her husband's estate, that she probably would have been forced out of her home and left to beg on the street. But again, once again, Levine points out the way that ancient Jewish society is painted in a negative light by Christian commentary and interpretation of the parables in order to showcase Jesus as the kind and merciful hero. She says the negative characterization of Jesus' Jewish context is, I fear, almost inevitable. For Jesus to look good, it seems that Jewish society must appear to be bad. In actuality, she tells us that being a widow in Jesus' time was probably had its challenges, there were actually several social safeguards in the law at that time that protected widows. Okay, they weren't just thrown on the street. I mean, it's like they're saying that the Jews just had this savage society. They just tossed widows onto the street. You know, not exactly the case. So certainly there were widows who were destitute, but not all. And a widow is not necessarily helpless and pathetic. And I started to think about it, and I thought, how do we know that the widow isn't actually rich? Maybe her husband was rich and left all of his land and property to her, and maybe that's why she's in court trying to protect her rights. We don't know. But it wouldn't have been totally unusual for a widow to be rich. In fact, we know that among Jesus' followers, there were several rich women benefactors who funded Jesus' ministry. Always the women behind things, taking care of business. They probably made casseroles and brought it to all the meetings, too. I'm sure. Well, we know they were over there doing the cooking while the disciples were talking about the real stuff. But some of those women who funded Jesus' ministry were certainly wealthy widows. I mean, we can only assume. And they chose to use their fortune to help spread Jesus' message. But we don't know the status of this particular widow, the economic status. The parable doesn't say if she's rich, if she's poor, if she's in between. But the point that Levine is trying to make is for us to be aware of certain stereotypes about characters that can keep us from getting at the deeper meaning of the parable that Jesus intended for us to get. All right, now let's look at the judge. In some of the traditional interpretations, the judge has been seen to represent systemic evil and institutional corruption. Some scholars highlight the fact that the judicial system of the time was corrupt, and judges were only concerned with amassing their own wealth and their personal prestige. But Levine points out that doesn't really hold here, because there's no talk of any money. There's no money changing hands. There's no bribe being made. So we can't assume that the judge is corrupt, and he doesn't seem terribly interested with personal prestige either, right? Because he's kind of grumpy and cantankerous. He admits that he has no respect for people and does not fear God. Doesn't sound like a good way to gain higher status and prestige. We also might want to consider that throughout the Gospel of Luke, Jesus displays a general dislike of judges and an apprehension of judges and judgment. Okay? And so in Luke, Jesus is portrayed as disliking judges, and Luke feels that judges are dangerous, and he's always urging people to forgive and not to judge. So it's not surprising that Luke labels the judge unjust in the final section of the parable. He says, the unjust judge. Hear what the unjust judge says. So there seems to be a bias here about judges, because the parable doesn't really give us any reason to see the judge as unjust. Has he done anything unjust? He initially refuses the widow's request. We don't really know why, but then he ultimately gives in and gives her what she wants, even if just to keep her from coming back and pestering him more and bopping him in the eye. Now, some commentators say that the judge is despicable because of what he readily admits about himself, right? That he doesn't fear God and he doesn't respect people. Others propose that maybe he's an otherwise honest man, but he succumbs to the pressure of the widow. And ultimately, he's unable to uphold his own ideals. Now, what about this thing about not fearing God? Well, that had a meaning back then, right? And the book of Leviticus does say that you shall fear your God. But Levine says that the fact that he doesn't fear God is not the same thing as making him unjust or corrupt. It might just mean that the man doesn't have a great moral compass. And what about his having no respect for other people? We don't really know what that's about. Levine says maybe he just refuses to defer to people of higher status. And maybe he refuses to be beholden to anyone. Remember, he refuses the widow a number of times. Maybe he has some integrity after all. There's so many questions here. Does the judge initially refuse to give in to the widow's demands because her request is legally wrong? Is she asking for something that's not legal? And if so, why does he end up giving in and giving it to her anyway? Has he just lost his integrity because he's tired of her pestering him? Or is he truly afraid that she's going to box him in the ears and give him a black eye? Seems kind of unlikely that a judge would be afraid of a widow, but who knows? In Jesus' parable, strange things happen. But Levine says that Jesus' first century audience would not probably have seen the judge in a positive light. So, we have a morally ambiguous widow and a morally ambiguous judge. And Levine says that they're actually a good match for each other. Neither one of them seems to be particularly likable or particularly moral. The widow's aggressive and relentless, and the judge is cranky and disrespectful. And they show a mutual lack of respect even for one another. Do you notice that there's so much that is left unsaid in this parable? There's so much information we don't have. And so we have no choice but to consider the parable from various angles. Now, Luke has told us that this parable is about praying and not losing faith. But Levine says that a first century Jewish audience would not have heard the parable in that way. I don't know why Luke says that. She says they would have no reason to think that a story about a widow pestering a judge would be about prayer and faith. So if it's not about prayer and faith, and we don't know enough about either the widow or the judge to really help us understand the story, what in the heck are we supposed to do with this parable? Well, I spent a good part of the week trying to figure that out. Well, guess what? Levine says that there really is no satisfying conclusion to the parable, which made me wonder why she chose to include this in her book. There must have been a reason, right? She says the parable leaves us with more questions than answers. The parable itself, she says, resists closure. It doesn't tell us really what happens. And so we have no choice but to derive our own meaning from it. And we do this by thinking about it and by talking about it, just as Jesus' disciples would have done. So what does the parable make you think about? In your mind, is this parable about the stereotypes that we place on others, like widows and judges? Is the parable about the question of justice versus vengeance? Does the parable make you think of a time when you were so angry with someone that justice wasn't enough? You wanted to get vengeance. Fess up. Have you? I'm sure we all have at one point, right? Or is this a parable about the justice system? And if so, is it showing things like courts and judges and lawyers in a positive or a negative light? Does it make us question when we've been wronged whether we can or should use the legal system to get vengeance? Now, Levine reminds us that Jesus was concerned with fairness, with reconciliation, and compassion. And yet, this parable defies any sort of fairness. There's no reconciliation, and there's no compassion displayed by either the widow or the judge. So she says that by leaving us with so little to go on, Jesus is forcing us to find our own moral compass. Like I said, I have to admit this parable really stumped me. And I thought about the fact that in the Bible, this parable comes in the midst of many parables. It's like there's a whole bunch of them coming one right after the other. And I thought to myself, I don't think Jesus told them that way. Because my brain's already fried from this one. Imagine if you had to hear 4 or 5 or 6 of these things in a row. I don't think anybody would have any idea what the heck he was talking about. Jesus' parables can be incredibly frustrating because they don't lend themselves to a clear moral of the story. Luke's introduction notwithstanding. Sometimes we're really not sure exactly what Jesus is trying to say. And this woman is like an uber scholar. So if she doesn't know what he's saying, then I sure as heck don't know what he's saying. But we do know that he meant for us to scratch our heads. And he meant for us to think about it. And in doing that, to open our hearts and minds to new ways of seeing and being. Perhaps, mostly, Jesus meant for us to walk away from hearing this parable and talk about it with one another. And we're going to have class afterwards, so we can do that a little bit. Because if you think about it, Jesus, the people that were listening to him, when he finished with his talk, they were all talking amongst, what do you think he meant? Right? And they would discuss those things together. And maybe in doing that, he was causing people to engage with one another on topics like widows, the treatment of widows, and judges, and justice, and vengeance. And then people would come to their own conclusions. Because Jesus knew that each and every one of us would have a different take on this parable and on all parables. That each person brings his or her own background, life experience, and ways of seeing the world to interpreting the parable. Maybe that was the point. That each person would get their own answers. Because as we say in Unity, the answers are not out there. The answers are only within us. So I'll be interested to hear from all of you as the week goes on, if you would report back to me whether you continue to think about this parable, because I know that last week's parable was working on me all week long. It was indicting me. It was causing me to think about some things that I've experienced and the ways that I've behaved. And I'm pretty sure that that was Jesus' intention. And that the parable was working on me just as Jesus planned. How will this parable work on you as the week goes on? It will be interesting to see.
blessing to the world.
So just getting comfortable in your seat and preparing for meditation, allowing all the outer distractions to fade away as you bring your attention inward. And we begin by becoming aware of our bodies, the sensations that are present in your body this morning, whether it's any discomfort or any tension, whether you feel hot or cold, how your body feels resting on the pew. And then you can tune into the sounds around you, noticing the sounds that are near you, the sounds that are a little farther away. And then finally allowing your attention to come to rest on your breath, being aware of each inhale and each exhale. Deepening your breath so that you're breathing in more deeply into the belly and feeling that release as you exhale. Continuing to let tension go. And just resting. Just resting in this place. Allowing your body to become still, your thoughts to settle down. And we just practice being in this divine, precious, sacred moment. Feeling that peace as you gently breathe in and breathe out. Settling even more deeply into your seat. And knowing that in this place is when we are most able to feel the presence of God. God's presence is always with us. We're so busy with everything that we don't notice it. But when we get quiet, when we become still, we find that there is something that is here. The presence of our own beating human heart. The feelings of love and connection for one another. This mysterious peace and sense of well-being that being in the presence of God brings. We often make it all way too complicated. It's about this moment, this breath, this body sitting here, these lungs breathing, this heart beating, this sacred, precious moment, right here in the silence.
blessing to the world.
So as we reluctantly bring this time to a close, we just remember that this place is available to us in any moment. It's just a breath away. And we can return here to this place where we find peace and renewal, and we restore our minds and souls. And so we're grateful for this experience, for this church, this community that supports us in our spiritual growth. And we say thank you, God. And so it is. Amen.
Unity of Monterey Bay is the collective consciousness and commitment of all of us who give of our time, treasure, and talent in order to sustain this spiritual community that is dedicated to transforming lives. We know that prosperity is a state of mind that finds blessings in every situation and abundance and joyous generosity. We transform all appearances of fear or lack into faith-filled peace of mind by shifting our attention to thoughts of gratitude for the abundance of God's good in our lives. As the ushers come forward, I invite you to think of something specific you're grateful for in this moment. And now, with our hearts and minds overflowing with gratitude, we breathe into the divine flow of God's good, trusting that we are enough, that we have enough, and that there always is enough to both have and share. We give thanks for all the ways you give, in person, online, monthly bank auto payments, credit cards, are using our new QR cards. QR code cards. And that QR code cards. We give thanks for all the ways you give. Sorry about that. And I ask that everyone join in faith and gratitude as we pass the offering baskets this morning by holding and blessing the basket as it passes to you. And now, please join me in our offertory blessing. I am an open channel for God's infinite good. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies everything I give and everything I receive. I am both blessed and a blessing. Thank you, God.
Go out and shine your light. You know the time is right. You gotta go out and shine your light. Go out and shine. Go out and shine. Go out and shine your light. You know
come on forward. So it is with great joy that we bless and give thanks for these gifts and offerings that demonstrate our collective commitment to the spiritual work of love and transformation in our lives and in our world. We dedicate this offering, our lives, and this ministry to more fully expressing the Christ light that is the truth of our being and inviting all people to know God's love. Finally, knowing that one with God all things are possible, we affirm together that the good is now, the rest is blessed, and the best is yet to be in our lifetime. Gently. Thank you, God, and thank you, ushers. We also want to thank today for our music, Sue Riley, Glenn Rothel, Melinda Wood Allen, Reverend David Bruner and Karen Drucker, Jan Aldridge Clanton, and Larry E. Schultz, David Roth. Are these all from today?
Yep.
Malvina Reynolds and Kelly Green. Wow. A number of them had two composers. And of course, our awesome music team. Yay. Okay. Spring dinner fling signups are still happening. There's things to sign up for? There are things to sign up for in the... There's a dinner that's full. Okay, so basically what we need now is more people signing up to host events. Okay, so you know the drill. You pick the time and the day and the menu and the cost and everything. And if you want to do it with another person, that is fine too. And it can be any time of day or night, anything you want. So yeah, just let us know if you want to host one of those events. Remember that our Pride March, the Monterey Peninsula Pride March, is going to be on June 29th, and we will be participating. Vicki is making a banner for us to carry, so that's going to help a lot to, so that when we're walking, people, that's what they see, and they know who we are. And we do have a table at the celebration at the end of the march. I've got one person that has agreed to help staff the table. So I need other folks to help with that because I usually sit up on the stage with the other clergy. So we'll need other people to be at the table while I'm up there. And lots of folks do come around, right? Especially when it's first over. When we first get there to the plaza, you're going to get a lot of people coming to the table, and we'll have some little giveaways. I'll probably get more of those. Last year, everybody loved those little tattoos you put on with water. Those were a big hit. So it's just a great opportunity for us to be a presence in our community and to support the cause, and also for people to just see who and what we are, and that we are a safe and inclusive church. July 7th is going to be our big annual anniversary barbecue celebration, 24 years as an independent church, 26 years with Vicki, and 5 years since my ordination. So big celebration. Make sure you come to that. And we provide the main stuff, the hot dogs and such, and then you all bring all the sides and everything. So, and today we're going to be having a class right after the service. We'll watch a short video that Dr. Levine makes about each of the parables. It's always really interesting to watch, and we'll have a little discussion about it, and I will have you out of here by 12:30, okay? And that's it. It ends today. Yeah. Alrighty. As we bring our service to a close this morning, yeah. Oh.
Next weekend. It's an easy thing to do. It's early in the morning on Saturday, 9 o'clock, 8:30 if you like earlier. And then Sunday after the service, we'll do highway there. If we do good on Saturday, we won't have to do Sunday.
How many bags do you have to get? You have to get a certain number of bags, right?
It depends on the people. We're hoping and wishing that there'll be more volunteers. The volunteers are kind of on the low side, and so we're hoping someone will step up. It's a safe, easy, quick thing to do, and it's a quick way to be of service. You do it for an hour, right? For an hour and a half. No more.
And if you want to reward yourself, the square donuts are right next door, right? In the little shopping mall there, yeah, next to where you guys meet, right? Thank you, Larry, and thank you for heading that up. And Larry needs at least one other person in order for him to even be able to go out. He's not allowed to go out and do it by himself. So
We just got the same people who's always done. So thanks, Walter is going to be one of the newer
Ask my husband. Robin is also coordinating it, so thank you to both of you. Okay, make sure you tell Paco. Make sure you tell him about Saturday. I think he can probably do that. Okay, good. Thank you, Larry. So as we bring our service to a close this morning, we're grateful that you have all joined us, whether you're here in person or you're joining us virtually, and whether it's your first time with us or you're a regular, we hope we've made you feel at home in our Unity of Monterey Bay community, and we want you to know that wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. If it's your first time with us today, make sure you pick up a newcomer packet on the way out. The ushers will give you one so that you can find out more information about our church and how to get on our newsletter. Chaplain on duty today is Larry. Larry's available to pray with you after the service, so thank you, Larry, for that and for all that you do. All right, let's form our closing circle. Everybody's kind of quiet today. What's going on? Why is everybody so quiet today? Any special prayer or anything? Yeah. Okay. All righty. So as I look around this circle, I see a number of folks struggling with health challenges, and so we hold all of those people in this healing circle, sending them our loving energy, seeing them enfolded in spirit and being restored to their right and natural state of complete health and wholeness. And we hold our world in this circle as well for peace, for justice rather than vengeance, for us to find a way to live with one another. So we hold the world in our hearts as we join in our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am light. The love of God enfolds us. I am love. The power of God protects us. I am power. The presence of God watches over us. I am presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be, with God as Creator, family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Hey, God.